Welcome to Inside Auto Podcast, where we feature everyone and anyone you'd want to talk to in and out of the automotive industry.
Ilana Shabtai here, host of Inside Auto Podcast, where we interview top dealers, GM, marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in and out of the automotive industry. And before we introduce today's guest, this episode is sponsored by AutoLeadStar.com. The AutoLeadStar platform is built on a technology so powerful it allows you to market, sell, and service cars as you would in the real world at scale and online, making one-to-one matches between shoppers and inventory. AutoLeadStar is the only platform that is powered by scale, speed, and specificity to change the way dealers do marketing today. Today we have a very special guest, Matt Tedesco. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, we're excited to have you. We have a lot planned for this episode. But before we begin, I do want to give you a quick introduction. Matt has a bachelor's in political science and an MBA in finance. Growing up, he played a lot of sports and was an all-American soccer player. That's cool. We need to learn about that in this episode. Yeah. He's been in the automotive industry for the last 15 years, working at Cobalt, Epsilon, and PureCars. He's worked with nearly every OEM and hundreds of dealerships covering most of New England and the greater New York area. He's currently the national program manager for the BMW field team at Shift Digital, where he's been for 4.5 years. He has a passion for EVs, which we'll also talk about today, emerging technologies, and all things digital marketing. This is what we love to hear on Inside Auto. So, Matt, thanks for joining us today. As you've probably heard on some of our previous episodes, it's a podcast tradition to open up the podcast and ask our guests how they got into automotive, because it feels like no one gets in on purpose. So let's hear your story. How did you stumble into automotive?
No, it was definitely not on purpose. I mean, I loved cars growing up, but I never saw myself getting into the automotive industry. When I originally went to college, I was at Brown and I was a pre-med major. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. And to make that long story short, my mom got really sick and I came back home. And her experience made me not really want to get into medicine. Mm-hmm. I ended up transferring schools and going to another one and decided to get a political science degree and was going to be a lawyer. My older brother is a lawyer and he convinced me that I don't want to do that. I enjoy my free time. So I ended up, after I graduated, I just worked at restaurants for a little while and started doing sales jobs. I was trying to get into pharmaceutical sales because I still loved medicine. And I applied for a job that was a DSM. And I thought the job was a district sales manager, which is what they had called the reps at like Pfizer and Sanofi Aventis and places like that. The job didn't have a company on it. So I was actually on my way to work at a restaurant. I got a call from a company, which happened to be ADP. And it was 4:00 in the afternoon. I interviewed at 9:00 the next morning and literally fell into automotive.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah. It was the same title. So I'm not sure if I got hired by ADP, Cobalt, or BZ results because they were all merging at the time. But my title was the same. It was a DSM. It was just, instead of a district sales manager, it was a digital solutions manager. And that was my first very automotive specific. I'd sold Yellow Pages and other things before that where I'd worked with dealerships. But that was just completely random.
Well, at least you had the experience of interacting with dealerships. That definitely.
Yeah, I'd sold. I had a bunch of Yellow Page clients. Because we're talking like 2005, 6, when people were still buying Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
And right before that, I sold telecommunications. So we were trying to like give them T1s and new phone lines, and long before people had, Wi-Fi and all of these other things that didn't really exist back then.
Yeah. Wow. So the industry has come so far, and we'll talk about that. But you recently got your MBA, right? Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I finished it in December of 2019. Like many of the people last year, because of COVID, I didn't get to walk.
Oh.
So it was kind of like, I felt like one of the high school kids that was on the news, like I've worked my whole life for this and I don't get to go to graduation. It was kind of depressing.
Well, there's a
right?
lot of like TikToks and reels about that too. I don't know if you're into that.
Oh, yeah.
They're hilarious.
So it was funny too, right? So Cuomo, our governor of New York,
Yes.
had just kind of opened everything up. And literally the next day we got an email that if you wanted to walk for commencement, you could walk. It was very limited. You could only have 2 people. I ended up going by myself actually, because I have 3 kids and I couldn't bring 2 of them and not one of them. So
bring your 2 favorite kids to your graduation.
Yeah. My daughter, and she'll pick one is really how that'll go. Yeah. And so there was 6 different ceremonies instead of 1 because of all the social distancing rules and stuff. And it was like 35 minutes. It was like 2 people got up and speak, read your names, you're out. Yeah. So, but it was great. Great. Yeah. It was super, super good experience. I'm glad that I decided to do it.
Yeah. So congratulations on that. And you wrote your thesis on electric vehicles. So I'm really excited that you're here to talk to us about that today, because we haven't covered this topic on Inside Auto Podcast yet. And I think a lot of people are interested in understanding, where's the industry going to go? Are consumers really aware or willing to make that change? Is that change going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years? Tell me a little bit about the landscape of EVs and what it's going to look like for us. And then I'll ask some specific questions too, because I definitely want to be educated on this. I don't know nearly as much as I should. So please tell us what you think about this topic.
Yeah. So when I started like going down that path with my advisor, it was 2017.
Okay.
And really at that point, it's just Tesla. Right. There's no other OEMs that are really trying to make that leap. They've talked about it in only with on the outside, right? So Tesla has just changed the landscape. Obviously, they've sold a ton of cars, right? They've expanded to China and Berlin and everywhere else that they are now. And
they control the crypto market, as we all know. So
yes, my Dogecoin is not doing great at the moment.
Well, who knows? Maybe Elon Musk will come out tomorrow and say that and endorse it, and then you'll be a millionaire. So let's wait.
I'm playing the long game with that, like Bitcoin, right? It was 10 cents, and now it's $40,000 for each one. So I'm just going to leave that there for a long time. But the EVs, so the EVs, obviously with climate change and everything else that's going on like that in the world, EVs are going to really change the way humans operate. I think at the moment, people are still concerned with things like range anxiety. Obviously, the price tag of a lot of them, right? So like Tesla's Plaid Plus is $150,000. So that's pricing most people out of the market. But like 50 years ago, computers were $30,000. So over the course of times, these things will get much cheaper. Most OEMs at this point have some type of plan, whether it's Volkswagen or Kia or BMW or Mercedes. Everybody's pretty much launched one or the other at the moment. And I think the most important part of that discussion is the battery technology. So like, we'll just keep using Tesla since they're kind of the industry leader. Their new battery that is a solid state battery on the car that they're launching next year has a 520 mile range, right? So a lot of the cars like Volkswagen, the ID4 only goes 220 miles.
Wow.
Right. So I still think there's a huge range anxiety for most people. Yeah. And honestly, I don't think it's really warranted. And the reason I say that, though, is because how often do you really just pick up and drive 300 miles? Like most people don't do that, right? Your daily commute
unless it's a global pandemic, then.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah. I think like, let's say, your husband and you, like if you have one that's an EV and one that's a hybrid today, you're great, right? I think obviously as the battery technology gets better and better over the course of time, I think like if we make batteries that go 1,000 miles on a charge and they charge in 5 minutes, I don't think anybody will buy a gas car ever again. Except maybe some enthusiasts who want to hear the engine and stuff like that. But,
Yeah, but I also think that as it gets more normalized, there will probably more charging stations. And actually, I think this is something that you can talk about, because I don't know what that's going to look like, right? Is everyone going to charge at home, or are there going to be charging stations? And will that affect the range anxiety?
So yes and yes. Yes and yes, right? So today, most of the charging happens at home.
Okay.
I think it's something like 95% of charging happens at home. Like if you think about it from your normal commute, like most people, and I'll just use myself, I stop at the gas station right before I get home.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what I do, right? Other than just going home. But
right.
Daily, I don't drive that much, even as a field rep, right? Like I could go back and forth to New York City or from North Jersey to Long Island, and that's still only maybe 100 miles, maybe.
Really?
So you can go back and forth all the time. I'm up in Albany, right? So I could drive, using that Tesla, I could drive from upstate New York to probably Washington, D.C. on a single charge.
Without charging? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so you're in Miami, right? How far is 300 miles from Miami? North of Orlando.
For sure north of Orlando. Yes, for sure north of Orlando. Yeah.
Almost South Carolina, maybe?
Yeah, I would say, maybe like Savannah. I'm not sure. Probably like the Savannah area.
But it's far, right? It's far. It's really far. So, I think the thing that we need to really explain to consumers is 95% of the time you're going to be charging at home.
Right.
If you really have range anxiety about something and you want to go on vacation, you can rent a car. Right? There's nothing that says that you have to drive that car everywhere, right? But in terms of the charging stations, I don't think most people understand how many there are today because you don't look for them.
Right, of course.
Right? Yeah. I mean, there's...
Like, I never noticed how many playgrounds there were because it never mattered to me. And now that I'm always looking for a playground for a toddler, I'm like, oh, is that new? And everyone's like, no, it's been there for years. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, totally.
Yeah, no, they built that playground in 1987.
Yeah.
Forever.
So, of course, the charging stations exist, but no one's looking for them. So
nobody's looking for them, right? So there's almost 50,000 of them today. And to put that in perspective, there's only 150,000 gas stations in the U.S.
Wow.
Right? So the current administration's plan is to have 400,000 charging stations. So we'll quadruple even the number of gas stations that there are.
Yeah, that will certainly.
So from that perspective. Yeah. I mean, and with the batteries too, and creating fast charging stations, like I don't think, it's a minor inconvenience if you've got to wait 20 minutes and you're on the throughway and you've got to charge your car. But it's going to be few and far between even today.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, there's so much that governments can do and OEMs can do. So, for example, like if BMW decided that they wanted to, install a home charging station with the purchase of the i4 that's coming out next year, right? That's a huge incentive that OEMs can do. Like they could work with a US-based contracting company or electrician company. I don't know who those are, but right, and have it installed with the purchase of your vehicle, right? So that consumers don't have to do those things on their own. The government can certainly incentivize those things in countries like Norway. You don't have to pay tolls. You don't pay parking, right? You get tax credits, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are working that can really incentivize consumers to go that way. I think there's actually two vehicles for the U.S. that are going to completely change the dynamic here. One is the F-150, right, which is the best-selling vehicle in the U.S. that Biden just did a test drive with. The other one, I think, is the Hummer, right? Okay. So there's that class of people, generally Midwest Southerners, right, that are truck drivers for the F-150 or just like bigger SUVs and stuff like that. So when they launch 1,000 horsepower Hummer, right, that's as fast as a Porsche, right, I think there'll be that's the other thing about this whole thing from like a consumer perspective. I don't think people realize how amazing the cars are from a performance standpoint. Right. So like Rivian, who's coming out with a truck and an SUV towards the end of this year, they're going to start delivering cars. When you buy the upgraded battery and the car's like 85,000, it's as fast as any Porsche.
Wow.
Right. It's 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. rocket
People love
ships,
that.
right?
Yeah, people are really love that.
Yeah, people are, I'm like, I love fast cars, right? I think it's going to be wonderful. Like the Tesla Roadster is like G-forces,
Yeah.
right? It's 0 to 60 in 1 second. It's like literally taking off in a rocket ship. So yeah, there's so many things going on.
Now, what's the parts and upkeep going to look like for the EV cars? Because I feel like maybe there's going to be less maintenance, but the maintenance will be more expensive. That's a total assumption.
Nope, correct.
Okay.
Correct. So EVs, as a general statement, have 40% of the parts that a car does today. Right. So there's the battery on the ground, right? That's on the floorboards, right? And then generally two engines. We'll call them engines. Power supplies that are going to each wheel in the front and the back.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of it. The rest of it is a computer. Right. So from that perspective, they're really computers on wheels, right? I mean, we've seen in the news, right? Elon does some type of like remote upgrade to every Tesla, and now they'll drive themselves, right? That's really the future.
Yeah.
And again, like computers 50 years ago that were $30,000, right? That cost will eventually come down. The industry is going to need more, mechanical engineers and computer engineers and things like that we don't necessarily have today. I think from an after sales perspective, the training is going to be just unbelievably robust and different than it is today.
Yeah. Interesting. So you mentioned that BMW is one of the OEMs that's obviously working on this. Can you tell us a little bit about the innovation that's happening at BMW? What should we look forward to in the next, year to 18 months from BMW?
Yeah, so we have two vehicles coming out the beginning of next year. One is the i4, which is the sedan. It's basically
and that's EV, right?
It's roughly 300 miles on a charge. I don't know the exact cost, but we'll say 55,000-ish. The other one is an SUV, which is the iX, which is pretty much the same. So those are both going to be in dealership roughly March of next year. And after that, I don't know what the production pipeline is, but I'm sure that there will be a release of vehicles that they just haven't told the general public about yet. But those are the first two, and they're coming.
And they're both EVs.
Yep, fully EVs.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's really cool.
I mean, from a competitive standpoint, everybody's really launching their vehicles right now. Mercedes just launched theirs. Audi's launched theirs.
Volvo, I believe, Nissan.
Yeah, Volvo has some. There's lots of other industry competitors like Rivian and Lucid Motors and Faraday Future and tons of other companies coming out. Polestar is another one that's owned by Volvo.
So Lucid actually just opened up down the street from me, and I was wondering, in Brickell, they have, I think it's one of their first showrooms that's opening up actually. So they're going to be a big competitor to OEMs as well, huh? Yeah,
they have two sedans that are basically, if you asked somebody who worked at Lucid Motors, they'd probably call them the Tesla killers, because that's basically what they are, right? So they are super high performance, right? I think the Lucid Air has almost 1,000 horsepower. Super fast. They're gonna make a big splash. I think the problem that a lot of those companies that are gonna have, like Rivian and Lucid Motors, is they don't have a dealership base. So from a franchise perspective, they're gonna run into the same problems that Tesla does, where they're only gonna be able to sell them in certain states. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch in the future, what the government decides to do with that, if they're going to allow all of them to do it. Because there's nothing that says like they couldn't stop Rivian from doing it.
Right. Yeah, that is going to be interesting. Yeah. Now, on that topic, we've seen some of your LinkedIn posts. We love them. I think it's really important to challenge the industry, because I don't think the industry is challenged enough. So what are some of the biggest challenges you think automotive will face in the next year So you can either pick and choose from some of the stuff that you've actually put out there on LinkedIn, or you could surprise us with some new content. But I also have a lot of opinion on this, so we can go back and forth. But I'd love to hear first from you. What do you think those challenges will be, and how should dealers start thinking about them?
So I think COVID has created a really interesting scenario, and the convergence of online digital retailing with EVs, I think, is going to have a big mess up in the industry, right? The reason I say that is because we've really been moving over the last couple years, and obviously COVID really accelerated digital retailing, right? And everything needs to be bought online. All of the OEMs want every dealer to have a tool, right? And make the buying process super simple, right? I do think the industry is moving that way as a whole, right? Digital retailing to me now is really just trying to make the experience in dealership a lot faster, right? So if you can spend, only an hour in the dealership as opposed to 5 hours, I think that's a much better consumer experience. The problem that I think we're going to have is, and I'll ask you this question, are you going to buy an EV without test driving it?
No, but I wouldn't buy any car without test driving it.
So that's the big challenge that I think is going to happen, right? We've had this big move towards doing everything online and not really going to the dealership. And I think all of a sudden we're going to need to get everybody back to the dealership to test drive a car that they've never sat in or ridden in or driven, or don't understand the new technology or any of those things. So I think dealerships are now going to be challenged to get everybody to do a test drive. Where, they should probably do that today, but that's just not the way the world is at the moment. Right?
I think that's a really interesting perspective, because I actually think that puts dealerships at an advantage, because they're going to bring people back in. They can work their magic. But, and this is the big but that I think you're going to get to, is how are you going to make the digital marketing strategy so precise and targeted that you're bringing in the people that you want to bring in, and you're making that experience so positive?
Yeah, I mean, from a digital marketing perspective, the hand raisers and people who are interested in those, I mean, you can target people on Facebook who are interested in EVs, right, and hybrid technology and stuff like that. A lot of the first party data that we'll have from the dealership, just sending out email blasts of and see who responds to emails and stuff like that. The whole convergence to me is really one of the things that we saw during COVID, which was trying to personalize the experience, right? So I may, instead of trying to get you to the dealership, bring the car to you, right? We can come do a test drive wherever you work. We'll pick you up, do it 30 minutes, drop you back off, whether it's your lunch break, you're at your house, whatever that might be. That personalization, I think, is going to have a huge part in the industry, especially for luxury brands. Mm-hmm. Customers have really gotten used to, we'll come get your car for service, right? That's going to be a hard thing to break from people who have gotten used to things like that.
Yeah.
So that, but that's great though. That's great from a dealership perspective to have that one-on-one relationship with the customer, where today, or say 2 years ago, they're walking into a dealership, there might be 50 other people there, right, at a busy dealership. And it's I don't know where to go, who I'm talking to, or any of those things. So I think all of it is great. Really, I do. From the EV standpoint, right, I'm a big on climate change and the stuff that we can do, as a species. So I think the EV and what Tesla has done is going to change a ton of other things, right? Like electric buses, right? We don't really have those here, but we're starting to, right? I wrote a post that China has 400,000 fully electric buses, right? I don't know about in Miami, but they're few and far between in New York.
We don't even have
right?
buses. We barely have
big
public
cloud of, it's a big cloud of smoke over you. So there's a lot of little steps that are all happening. The battery technology, I think, is going to move things along for your computer. Who doesn't want their MacBook to last for a week, right? Or your wearable, right? I mean, all of those things are really going to, they're all converging at the same time, which I think is great.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it. I also think there's more competitors that are coming into the space. So dealerships now are not only competing against dealerships down the street and Tesla and Carvana, but it's now all of these companies that are coming in. And I think Apple and Amazon, they're all saying that they're going to bring on their own cars. So there's going to be a really interesting landscape.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon gave Rivian $700 million. So Rivian has a partnership with Amazon. They also have a partnership with Ford, who gave them $500 million. So Rivian is creating a fleet of 100,000 fully electric delivery vans for Amazon. Those have started to roll out today. So yeah, Bezos has a huge interest in EVs, as do many of them.
Right.
So Warren Buffett has been invested in China since 2007 in a company called BYD that also makes electronics and batteries and all of those other things. Bill Gates is invested in a company called QuantumScape, which is building better battery technology, just like Tesla did. They're also partnered with Volkswagen. So there's lots of money getting influxed into all things EV.
Which basically means that consumers, we need to prepare. It's happening.
Yeah. And Apple too, right? So there was an interview with Elon Musk maybe a year ago at this time. And he was asking about Apple. He put the company up to bid for Apple, or Apple wanted to buy it, and he decided not to do it. And that was like 6 or 7 years ago. And Apple is now building a fully electric car. And he said, the interviewer asked him, "Are you sure about that?" And he said, "It's kind of hard to hide when you've hired 1,000 engineers from me to do it."
I read about that. I read about this interview. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, what is the Apple car going to be like, right? I mean, yeah, it's crazy to even think about.
Yeah.
That ecosystem of like, I'm an Apple person, so I got my Apple Watch, my iPad, my MacBook, my iPhone, right? Yeah. That
my iCar.
Right. Yeah. And my iCar, right? I'm sure that's what it'll be called.
I'm sure.
Right. That whole ecosystem of technology is just going to be crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, before we sign off, because this has been so informative for me, and I mentioned this before we signed on, that I really want to wrap my head around EVs. So thank you for being able to bring this content to us. Before we sign off, though, I need to know, do you still play soccer?
So I've been a little injured lately, but normally, yes. Yeah, cool. I hurt my foot, but yeah, I play on a men's league team. Normally every summer and sometimes in the winter when I'm not skiing and stuff. But yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we have a professional soccer player here today, as well as the NBA, and really just an incredible thought leader in the space. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Inside Auto Podcast. If you liked this episode, please tune in. We're on all mainstream apps. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Thanks for listening to Inside Auto Podcast. Check out our other episodes with top entrepreneurs and industry leaders.